Most men die at 35, they just don't get buried till they're 80. I've realised that I was really living a life by default, not really thinking it through properly, not thinking about what I wanted. The ultimate kind of rock bottom for me, and that was filing for bankruptcy. Every area of my life kind of fell down and I had to rebuild it from the ground up.
How does a man get out of his own fucking head and make that change before he hits rock bottom?
Mate, you can go and spend $75,000 on a car, but you can't spend $5,000 on therapy or a coaching program. You're taking the piss. Until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, most won't make that change. Psychedelics has played a really big role in me expanding my consciousness and finding answers. And it's no surprise that Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, half of Silicon Valley use psychedelics regularly to... Maybe in the 90s or the early 2000s could you get away with just being the provider. But mate, we're in 2024, going into 2025. That is nowhere near enough.
Blake Worrell-Thompson has helped hundreds of men get the life they deserve, a life by design where they're successful in their relationships, their business, their career, their health, every single part of what it means to be a man. In today's podcast episode, we break down his insane story of going from being a successful guy to being completely bankrupt, losing his first marriage, and almost ending his life. Through that time, he's been able to turn his life around and absolutely dominate in all the key areas, winning in health, wealth, relationships. We break down how to communicate, the power of psychedelics, MDMA, and magic mushrooms, and how they can affect your business or relationship, and so much more. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Empowered Man podcast with Blake Worrell-Thompson.
All right, so we've got Blake Worrell-Thompson here, an absolute legend doing some big things, helping the men of Australia. And do you coach women as well, yeah?
A bit, women still, yeah, a bit, yeah.
But changing lives, man, this life by design principle you're talking about is just exactly what our audience and I get to learn about. So I'm so pumped to have you here, man. You feeling excited? You feeling pumped?
Mate, very excited to be here for sure.
Awesome. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are and what you do, man. Tell us your story and then we'll just free flow and give some value.
Yeah, well, the life by design concept originally came from me not having my life in a good place at all, and having to rebuild every area of my life essentially from the ground up. And prior to that, kind of 15 months prior to that, was the ultimate kind of rock bottom for me, or at least at the time I thought it was. And that was filing for bankruptcy. And I'm sure you can understand, as a business owner and as someone who takes a lot of pride in what they do and also who they are, the bankruptcy was like the worst moment for me at that time of my life. And little did I know that that would be the catalyst for a 15-month capitulation where every area of my life kind of fell down and burnt to the ground, and I had to rebuild it from the ground up. So that was really the start of this life by design, where I, over the kind of the years, I've realized that I was really living a life by default, not really thinking it through properly, not really being intentional, not really thinking about what I wanted, and just following the path that everyone seemed to be following, but it didn't feel right for me. And I was always having this internal dialogue of like, kind of looking around going, everyone's just following the same path. Does anyone ask, like, am I the only one asking questions? Am I the only one wanting more from life? Am I the only one who's feeling this sense of like emptiness? And over the last 5 years, from the rock bottom and rebuilding myself up, a lot of it's kind of made more sense now. But at the time just didn't make any sense at all. So that was the birth of, the concept of life by design.
Insane. A lot of guys are just drifting, right? Like there are more coaches, programs, YouTube videos than ever. And it seems like men are lost. And it's not just men who have nothing. It's men who have $10, $100 million businesses. Yeah. They're stressed, they're anxious, they're depressed, their marriages are breaking down, and no one questions it.
Yeah.
It's like work hard, provide, make money, but then what? What about the other areas of life? So how does life by design work? Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a man who's living life by design?
Well, to your point, and I don't know your circle so much, but, us being kind of half a degree of separation, most men in my world do well financially. And, in my world, I kind of look at the 6 Ps, profit's been one of them. Most blokes in my world are ticking that. But when it comes to actual purpose, like, is what you're doing really something that lights you up and that feels like it's changing the world? Performance, how's your health and fitness and everything that's encompassed into that? Passions, what's your own development like? What are your own values like? What makes you individual, and what's that path look like? Partner, big one for us. Relationships, like, cool, awesome that you're the breadwinner, but like, how's your actual relationship with your partner, your kids? And then people, what's your community like? What's your friendships like? And that was the accumulation of both a personal and a professional, path, looking at it and going, what actually fills me up? And then combining that with the science and the research of what makes a good life. That was kind of where those 6 Ps came to light. And, maybe in the 90s or the early 2000s, could you get away with just being the provider? It was like, cool, I'm making a lot of money. My family is well looked after from a provider point of view. But mate, we're in 2024, like going into 2025. That is nowhere near enough these days, at least in the eyes of the like high quality women that I surround myself with. They want more than that. So that's where, a lot of guys are coming in. 1 P is ticked, but they're dropping the ball in other areas.
Yeah, and that passion and purpose piece it's so elusive for so many guys. My most successful months in business, I've had no passion, I put it to joy. Like, what do you enjoy in life? Sure, you're ticking those boxes, getting the nice things, you get the car, but then you feel empty inside. You feel like you're not actually living a life, like you say, by design. And then that by proxy destroys your marriage, destroys your relationship with your kids. And then years go by. Like, we stay stuck in that place for years. How much of this do you think, you mentioned the 90s and 2000s, how much of this do you think comes from this idea of feminism and the disconnection between masculinity and femininity? Like, what do you think's happening there?
I was listening to a podcast actually on the way here about it, which I'm a bit concerned that we're kind of meeting in the middle. So masculine, and obviously it's not very popular at the moment to be masculine, with toxic masculinity and a number of movements that have happened. But also women find themselves coming more to that middle ground in terms of more masculine. So we're meeting in this depolarized central place where men are becoming more feminine, women are becoming more masculine, which, there's a number of issues of that. But from a chemistry point of view, you're really starting to mess with polarity, because polarity, pole opposites, needs both a masculine and a feminine dynamic. And for that reason, a lack of chemistry, a lack of passion within a relationship is one of many things that are breaking down within a home environment.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So basically it's that disconnection of roles, right? It's like, who are you as a man and who are you as a woman, and how does that integrate into the relationship?
Yeah.
So we'll get into partner and people in a second, but talk to me about passion and purpose. Because there's a lot of guys who listen and go like, yeah, I do have the money and I have the car and I have the toys, but my marriage is fucked. I'm unhappy. I'm stressed out all the time. How does somebody have success and achieve more profit without sacrificing passion and purpose?
There's a lot to it. I mean, when I look at purpose, I look at, on a deep evolutionary level, the need for the masculine to have a deep purpose, passion, or mission. And that's very different from a high paying job. Because if you've got a high paying job, but it's just kind of paying the bills and it's looking after your partner and the kids, awesome. But your deepest evolutionary need is to be on point with purpose, passion, or mission. And for me personally, I've been lucky enough to experience that in the fitness industry first. And then, I was in it for 15 odd years. And on the 14th year, it just died. It died within me overnight. And I got to experience what life was like or is like for a lot of guys, where they're just going through the motions. It just felt more painful because I had experienced what life looks like and feels like when you're on purpose. And then I went through this kind of, dark night of the soul where I was trying to work out my next moves, thought it was in the coaching space, but couldn't really see it. And then, to come into that space now and be really passionate about it, there's a flow and effect across the board. And I'm sure you've experienced this. Like, when I'm on purpose, everyone benefits, not just me. The flow and effect to my partner, the flow and effect to my family, the flow and effect to my friends, and the flow and effect to my coming daughter is massive. To be a guy who things aren't working well at home, and you get in the car and you go to a full-time job where you don't like it but pays the bills, to then come home to a household that's not working, that sounds like a fucking living nightmare to me. So what do you need to do to find passion, to find purpose in your life, knowing that there's a flow-on effect. Because the way that I look at it, you being passionless or purposeless isn't just affecting you. You know, imagine your daughter, imagine your son, imagine your partner just seeing you kind of walk around, lacking presence, lacking like passion and zest for life. And then here you are telling your kids to go and live their dreams, knowing that they are more impacted by your actions and your words. And they're looking at dad going, well, you're not. You don't look like you look like you're just going through the motions. And it comes back to that saying, I can't remember who said it, but most men die at 35. They just don't get buried till they're 80. Do you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll kind of encourage men to go to the edge of the earth if that's what's required to find the passion that's needed, knowing that there's a flow-on effect across the board.
Just really quickly, if you're getting value from this podcast episode, I'd appreciate a massive favor. If you're watching on YouTube, give this a thumbs up, or if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform, give this 5 stars. It helps us reach more men, keep more families together, and get better guests onto the show. So if you're getting value, all that I ask is you take 5 seconds to give it a thumbs up or 5 stars so we can help more people and keep delivering you epic value.
I'd say a lot of men understand that. They know that something needs to change, but they're also in denial. Like we've coached guys making $50 to $100 million a year in their businesses, very successful, and their purpose is tied to their business. Their identity is tied to their business. So for the guy listening at home right now, how does he know that he's going through the motions? Is it the lack of connection in the relationship? Is it the waking up at night thinking about things and not being able to switch off? Because I think a lot of guys are listening going, yeah, I am that guy, but like, how do I fix it? How do I keep providing and keep putting food on the table? Because they're juggling all the balls, wearing all the hats. So it seems like for you, 14 years, boom, it dies off. You build this life by design. A lot of guys are like, yeah, cool, how? Like,
yeah,
right? So what does it mean to go to the edge of the earth? And how do you know you're going through the motions? And how do you shift that when your identity is tied to the grinder and the fucking provider? Like, how do you do that?
I think one of the challenges for a lot of guys, and I mean, we're speaking specifically to guys, but this isn't exclusive to just guys, is sometimes it's hard to know that you're going through the motions. You might kind of gauge it, but often for a lot of people, it's this like slow, subtle slumber that you find yourself in. And it's a deterioration over, 6 months, 3 years, 5 years, and something needs to like really snap for you to wake up. And for some guys, and I'm sure you experience this in your world, it's the falling down of their marriage. Something needs to like shake them out of the slumber. So, one of the big things that I think is super important is having the community around you that support you and hold you accountable to a higher standard. And most guys have men around them, but are they the type of men that are holding you accountable? Are they the type of men that are really supporting you on a deep, nourishing level? Most people don't have that, or they might have one or two. So, often you might find yourself going through the motions. Are you aware? Are you not? Guys fall into 2 categories. But often, one of the things that's really helped me is finding a number of tools that help me understand myself better. Because the better you can understand yourself, the better you can start to kind of join the dots as to where to go. And for me, that's looked like a number of things. Psychedelics has played a really big role in me expanding my consciousness and finding answers. I've done a number of Vipassanas, 10-day silent meditation retreats. I've got friends, I've got coaches, I've got therapists, I've got my partner. Like all of those are helping me build awareness around myself. And if you don't have access to a coach, then, what would it look like to create a friendship group who can reflect back to you regularly where you're at? So one of the things that I'll ask my friendship group every 3 months is, where do you see me letting myself down? Or where am I limiting myself? I can't see it. Blind spots are blind for a reason.
Yep.
So if I'm checking in with them every 3 months, they're bringing to light what I'm not seeing. And coming back to your point around denial, you don't get to a place of bankruptcy without a level of delusion or denial. And for me, I don't know what your biggest fear is. One of my greatest fears is finding myself in a state of delusion or denial, whether it's about my health, whether it's about my fitness, whether it's about my body composition, whether it's about my relationship, whether it's about how I'm going to show up as a father. Like that's one of my greatest fears. And there's been a number of times where I've got on the scales You know, even there's a place across the road where I got my DEXA scan last year, and it showed up at 23% body fat. I was like, fuck, that can't be right. You know, and I got to the point where I was like, I might ask them twice to take the, and I just had this moment. I was like, mate, that's where you start. Like, how did I get there?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I remember in Sydney, just before I left Sydney, same thing happened. I got on scales at a DEXA scan place and I was 90 kilos. I'm 81 now. I'm like, where the fuck did that weight just come from? Do you know what I mean? So if you're not in a real environment where you are, you know, accountable, but also got those moments of reflection back to you to understand yourself better, then you can drift really easily. And drifting doesn't necessarily just show up in one area of your life. If you find yourself drifting in your work, don't be surprised if you start drifting in your relationship, in your friendships, in your fitness, in your health, in your role as a parent. So for me, that is the ultimate to stop ourselves from drifting. And I think the other thing for us to consider, you know, similar to you, is we work with a lot of guys who are very successful.
Yeah.
And when you live the good life, which many of them do, that can be a slippery slope into comfort, convenience. It's when you're up against the wall that all of a sudden you find this level and you need to be on. But if you're living the good life, financially or whatever it might be, that is often like a blocker from you living a great life. And when you're comfortable and you're convenient in business or financial or whatever it might be, again, don't be surprised if the slippery slope starts in your life as a whole.
Yeah, and it creeps up on you.
Massively.
It's that comfort, and it's also complacency.
Yeah.
Like some of the most broken down men are also some of the most successful because they think that that's enough. It was in the 90s and the 2000s, as you say, but it no longer is. And back to your point about like needing to, I think you didn't say it like this, but hitting rock bottom. So for me, that was when I would be drinking every day whiskey while coaching my clients. I've got 200 men like on a call listening to me, and it's 12 p.m. and I got some whiskey in my hand, and it started off as one whiskey, then it became two, then it became four. Then I started arguing with Rosie, my wife. And one night, Rosie and I get into an argument about something stupid. It's always something stupid, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Same shit over and over again. So I got a pizza in my lap. I throw the pizza at the wall. It stains the wall. I run to my balcony in Bondi and I jump off the balcony. And the next day, just seeing my wife look at me with pity and disgust, but also love, like that was the breaking point for me. And I didn't drink. I haven't been drunk since then properly. Now, a lot of guys know they have these problems. They know that they're sedating, isolating. They don't have a coach. They don't have a friend group, but they need to hit rock bottom. There's also men listening to this who go, fuck, that's me. Maybe I change before rock bottom hits. So what's your process for change? Because everything you're sharing is so powerful, like psychedelics, silent retreats, having a network, having a coach. And I can see and hear the listeners right now going, yeah, but I'm too busy, but I don't have enough time, but that's going to sacrifice my wealth. How does a man get out of his own fucking head and make that change before he hits rock bottom? Like, what do you do there?
Well, you know, one of the challenges for a lot of blokes, to speak to your point, is until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, most won't make that change.
Give me an example of that.
So when it becomes less painful, and when we're talking about painful, we're not talking about physical pain, but when it becomes less painful to finally go and speak to a therapist, to finally go and speak to a coach, than to live the life that you're living because that's more painful, that's when most blokes will take steps. So I ideally don't want, I'm sure you feel the same, I ideally don't want blokes to hit rock bottom. But some need to get to that place in order to create change. Because when it's that painful, then they'll change. When it comes to transformation, I used to think awareness was the key as a starting place. And there's a number of steps around that. I tend to think some kind of serious audit or some kind of serious assessment of where you're actually at is now the first step. And an audit and an assessment starts with the truth. And that's an uncomfortable place to start.
That's painful.
Yeah, it's extremely painful. So, you know, to the quote before around the pain of change, if you're going to start with an audit, is a real assessment of where you're at. a real assessment of where you're at from a business point of view, a real assessment of what your kids think of you, a real assessment of the relationship that you've got with your partner, a real assessment of your health, fitness, etc. And some things are more obvious than others. Like a real assessment of your health might be, mate, you're fucking 30 kilos overweight. Like we can see the issues. Some are kind of not so easy to see. So that real assessment of where you're at and the truth, and it sounds like simple, start with the truth, but just about everyone's lying.
Yep.
Out in the world. And that might be hard to stomach, but it's the truth. Most people are lying in some way, shape or form. And you might consider little white lies not a lie, but the reality is they're a lie. So the moment that you actually decide to start telling the truth, it's probably going to be painful, depending how far down this slippery slope you are. But you need to start there. And that's the kind of pivoting point for many.
Yeah. And it's not just that you can't see it. Sometimes you can't feel it.
Totally.
Like since we're young men, we're taught not to feel, don't cry. Our ancestors, when they went to war, this started when the first two world wars started. If you look down the barrel of a gun and feel for your opponent, you will die.
Yeah.
So it's been drilled into us as men, do not feel, suppress your emotions. So there's a lot of guys who can't see the relationship issue, but they feel disconnected. They feel a lack of respect. When they look in the mirror, they feel ashamed. They feel guilty. But a lot of men don't have that awareness because they don't know how to feel. It's been suppressed for so long. We have an assessment at Empowered Man. It's called the Key 3. So we have health, wealth, relationships. And we get really fucking raw on like what's not working in your health. And then what's the consequence of that? So one of the things that I do, I'm like, if I don't get my health in order, I will die. I make myself feel more pain. I'm like, if I don't do this, my daughter's going to be with a fat fuck who doesn't treat her well. And I create that pain. What's your assessment strategy? So if a guy needs to see the pain now, what's not working, what's the truth? How do you assess that for your clients and what would you recommend?
So I start across the 6 Ps.
Yeah.
And give them a score out of 2 and 8. So the thing with, many other assessments is they're self-diagnosed. Let's say, for example, you're doing like a life assessment. You give yourself a score out of 10. There's a level of delusion and denial that got you to where you are. So to self-assess, there's a good chance you'll carry the delusion, denial around. So for me, I'm giving them a score out of 8. And essentially they either fit 2, 4, 6 or 8. And there's a description on each level that they best fit themselves. So 2, you're not having any sex, you're at war with your partner the whole time, your kids hate, very kind of, it's more detailed than that, but that's, to the point where an 8, super passionate, the honeymoon period hasn't worn off, you're having good sex, your kids and you self-assess based on the closest description to you. And again, similar to you and your assessment, that's eye-opening, but it's the truth. And at least it gives us somewhere to start. And this isn't about shaming you, because shame will only suppress something and you're likely to push it in the shadow and then we've got another issue. This is just about knowing where we're starting. And your life might be a 1 out of 10. It might be a 7 out of 10. It doesn't matter where we're starting. It matters where we're going. And, for me, it had to get to, a 0.2 out of 10 to the place where I was like, is this even worth living? For me to go, okay, turn it around. And again, everyone comes in at different points. Ultimately, I don't want them to reach rock bottom, but I've also seen how blokes at rock bottom are the ones that change the fastest.
Yes.
So if that's the pain that they need to experience to completely transform their life, mate, I don't know about you. I love working with blokes that have reached rock bottom because they're ready to go.
Yeah.
So, it sounds kind of a bit rough, but if someone comes in at that much pain, they can move mountains generally to kind of turn things around.
And they will.
They will.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Anyone can move a mountain, but it's the will and desire. It's a must, not a I want to.
Yeah.
But it's funny, we have guys that come to us, and you probably have the same experience, who are at rock bottom. My wife has left me. I have no time. She's taken the kids. And we get to the end of the coaching call. You mentioned coaching earlier. If you can't afford a coach, you can't afford not to have a coach. Whether it's you, anyone else out there, us, doesn't matter. You need that outside accountability. And they'll literally tell you they've lost everything. They're going to lose everything. And 80% of those rock bottom guys will pay whatever it costs. They'll invest, they'll sell a kidney. But then you have the guys who go into this fear cycle because they're so comfortable and complacent and being stuck, and they'll need to ask their wife or think about it. And I don't know if you've had this experience, they almost never come back.
Yeah.
They're just stuck in that cycle. And what they don't realize is that cycle is fucking up their children and their future. So for somebody who's at rock bottom, they've reached out for help, they've had the courage to do that, and they're stuck in that cycle of I need to think about it, I need to ask my wife, I can't afford it. What do you say to that person? Because there's many of those guys listening right now. They know their life's fucked. It's by default. How do you push through that barrier when you are at rock bottom and you're still not willing to fucking change?
To your point, they're not willing to, like, I'll give you an example for me, and I know a bit about your story, but not that much. I think about the importance of me sorting out me, first and foremost. And up until this point, that's looked like 250 odd therapy sessions across the board and probably 30 psychedelic journeys. I not only have a role and responsibility to continue to do that for myself, more importantly, I think I have a responsibility to do that for my partner, and even a bigger responsibility to do that for my daughter that's coming. Like, her and society, I owe it to them. So if you can't do it for you, like, look at your kids that run around, every day and decide to do it for, like, you can't, to your point, you can't afford not to do it. But if for whatever reason you can't muster up the courage to invest in you for you, consider the flow-on effect. Because I know the impact that my mum and dad, they did the best that they could. I know the impact that they had on me and the amounts of work that I've had to undo and heal and overcome over the last 20 years. I'm not okay with passing that on to my daughter. And I think it's arrogant and ignorant for any bloke to think that that's okay. Mate, you can go and spend $75,000 on a car, but you can't spend $5,000 on therapy or a coaching program. You're taking the piss.
Yeah, and some men need to hear that. Yeah. It's like you need that slap in the face. You're always being watched. You're being watched by your team. You're being watched by your wife or partner. You're being watched by your children. And what men fail to remember, or maybe they're not aware of, is your loved ones, your team, they're always creating a story of who you are. So if you don't have the courage to do it for yourself, ask yourself, if I was to die today, how would I be remembered? Would I be remembered as the guy who's calm, a role model, a leader, healthy, fit, someone they can rely on, or the guy who's never home, the guy who's always stressed, grumpy dad, angry husband? I think a lot of men will change when they think about their loved ones, because that's why we work so fucking hard.
Yeah.
So we say we want to build freedom for our family. We're never there for our families. So let's talk about the partner or the relationship side of things. How long have you been with your partner, and what's the story behind that? Just
under 4 years. Yep. So at time of this, we've had a big 3 months with the proposal and the pregnancy. And mate, off the back of my last relationship, I was 34, give or take, I think. And I wasn't like that, bankruptcy came with a breakup and just a continual kind of evolution of a capitulation over a 15-month period. And at 34, with no idea what I was doing, no idea where I was going, I kind of thought my best years were behind me. And that was a doubt that I had within myself, and I kind of lacked confidence. And then I had other blokes reinforcing, mate, I think you're going to kind of have to settle, which for me, like, is the ultimate kind of depression, settle. So as I started to kind of rebuild my life, I decided to move to Byron and met her first day of working in Byron. And then, friends for 6 months before, and then just it's continued to blossom. And, I really struggled previously in relationships. I kind of struggled just to get to the 18-month mark of a number of previous relationships. And then this one, coming up to 4 years in, I feel like we're just getting started. And, for me, there's a real significant difference between that sense that you're a partnership and that sense that you're at war with each other. And to have my kind of dream team, me and her, and now obviously bringing a little girl into the world, mate, I don't know how you feel. Like, I feel like I can do anything in a partnership, Whereas when I was in previous relationships and we're at war with each other, I was like, fuck, like, life's tough enough out there. And then I'm coming home to us being at war together.
Yep.
And they're worlds apart. And I think I don't know how you see this in relationships, but once you start to see what a partnership looks like, you can kind of see who's in partnership and who's at war with each other. And there's different elements to that. There's a co-creation of the partnership, but I also tend to think there's other elements that are at play with that. Someone's relationship with their dad has a big influence on, how they see the masculine, and therefore do they want to be in partnership or are they at war? Relationship history, there's a lot that you can bring into that. And again, mate, when I was, when her and I started dating, I was rebuilding myself. And the belief that I had at the time was I can't do both at the same time. I was like, I can't build a business and build a relationship, because previously I couldn't. Previously in other relationships, there was attachment styles playing out and they were just so consuming that they consumed a lot of my headspace. So I had this belief going into this relationship of like, well, it needs to be one or the other. And I really rebuilding myself from the ground up from a bankruptcy. I can't afford to look sideways. I can't afford not to get this right the second time. So we kind of put it on the back burner for about 6 months and we're just friends. And then it just became inevitable that like we couldn't not do this. And she's like the best weapon for me in life and business. Previously to her, I thought relationships were going to make my life harder or a distraction, and there's no way that I would be where I am without her.
That's so powerful. And this destroys men's relationships, is the fact that they are disconnected. Your business cannot flourish. Your wealth and career cannot flourish. Your health cannot flourish if you don't have that intimate relationship in place. So many men think that a lack of sex and intimacy is normal. They think that 6 months between roots is normal. They think that their partner is a naggy bitch, but they don't want to say it. And when they do say it, they say it in anger and frustration. They don't feel supported. And they don't feel respected. Now, on the flip side, that is what a normal relationship gets to look like. So a lot of guys will listen to this and go, wait a minute, I can have a partner who is also a cheerleader, someone I can make love to, someone who desires me, someone who appreciates me, someone who respects me and makes my business or career easier. What the fuck, right? It's crazy. Yeah. But this is the thing. Most guys don't realize it's possible. It is. So what would be the first step you would take if you have the fucked up relationship and business and stress and wealth stress and you're not healthy and you're always triggered and your relationship's fucked? Because when you go to bed at night, you're roommates instead of soulmates. How do you fix that, especially when it's been going on for years and years and years and you don't even believe you can have something different? What's the first step? Like, walk me through that.
By far, the most powerful thing that I think every couple should do in a relationship is this thing that Shani and I call rituals of connection, where every Sunday we have a relationship check-in. Every single Sunday. It's a non-negotiable. And it's actually for us, because we were friends for 6 months before, it's been there since week 1. For most couples, they get to a place where we need to talk is a build-up of something. And then, you've got all this energy behind it and the tone, it just gets messy. So if you started to implement a weekly check-in for the relationship every week, things don't have a chance to build up. And often the fights aren't necessarily what are said, they're the way in which they're said. And the way in which they're said is influenced by the fact that you've been sitting on something for 12 months and it's been building resentment. You even look at one of the top reasons why people disconnect sexually is the amount of resentment that's been built up. Of course you don't want to fuck your partner if you've been carrying like all this resentment for the last 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
So making the non-negotiable for you to have a weekly check-in with your partner is by far the number one thing that I've experienced firsthand in my relationship, and also the men that we work with as well. And dude, take lead. From a healthy masculine point of view, leadership is super important. Take lead and go like, this is what we're committed to. Yes, if you're looking at kind of evolutionary masculine feminine, the feminine's piece might be around connection and yours might be around purpose. But like, if you're listening to this, you don't have to wait for her to come to the table with something. Make a commitment every Sunday. So even if things are full on at work, you've got that touch point every single Sunday. And I'll say Sunday, it can be whatever day you want, but I just do it on a Sunday. You've got that touch point every single week to talk about the relationship, to talk about what's working, to talk about what's not. And, I have a ebook of which there's 52 questions in there, one that you can ask your partner every week. But you could start with something super simple like, how could I support you better this week? Or how could I have supported you better last week? Super simple. And just move forward from that place.
But a lot of guys are afraid of that. We have a framework very similar. It's called laser focus: love, appreciation, support, understanding, respect. And Rosie and I have been doing this for about 2 years now. Like 2 years ago, even though I was coaching men in relationships, we weren't intimate. We just had our daughter. I thought I had my shit together. Did not. I was not prepared. And what we started asking each other every weekend is, are you feeling loved? Yes or no? Why/why not? Appreciated, supported, understood, respected. Once we cleared those things, if Rosie wasn't feeling something, she'd tell me why, and then I'd commit to how to fix it.
If you're getting value from this podcast episode and you want to learn how you can have a better relationship, a better marriage, you can be a better father, husband, the man you know your family deserves, then it's very fucking hard to do that just by listening and getting fed information. Sure, this is valuable, but what's much more valuable is having a custom roadmap and a custom plan. And that's exactly what we do here at The Empowered Man. So if you want to learn how to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, and find work-life balance, then that's exactly what we want to help you with. We'll help you make more money, working less hours, have that life you deserve by becoming unfuckwithable. Just tap the link down below in the description and go and book a coaching session with my Empowered Man team. On that session, we'll build your custom Empowered Man roadmap to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, find work-life balance, and have the life you deserve. Click the link down below right now.
And then a question we asked was, well, did anything come up for you this week that you want to address?
Yeah,
and guess what? Yeah, exactly. And at the beginning, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But this is the crazy thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this. We have nothing anymore. Like we haven't argued in 6, 12 months.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. She shared with me the other day, I sent her a text saying, I love you so much. You're an amazing mother and an amazing wife. And her response, it got me emotional, was, I feel the same way about you. I've just been looking at you this week and thinking about how much I love you. 8 years together, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, men can have this, and you just gave them a powerful framework. When we give that framework to some of our clients, they don't do it. What is that? What is that blockage? Like, you just gave the keys to the kingdom. Have a chat, have a meeting, just like you would at work, ask a question. Men just are terrified of doing it, some of them. Like, how do you face that fear and push through this thing that you're not skilled at?
If you haven't been showing up in your relationship, there's a good chance that you'd probably experience fear. So you need to decide whether you want to continue a relationship where you guys sweep everything under the rug, or if you want a relationship built around truth. And mate, like, we've had 2 heated conversations in 4 years, but we don't really fight. And people are like, oh, you don't fight. No, we don't fight, but we have a lot of firm conversations. And that firm conversation is these type of questions that elicit a response. You know, like one of the questions that I asked Shani probably 2 months ago was like, if in any way you've lost respect for me, how and where has that shown up?
That's a mirror.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, most blokes want respect, but they're not willing to have the conversation around where it's built, where it's lost. So you have to decide, do you want to continue to kind of sweep things under the rug, or are you willing to go to the place of truth for your relationship? And there's a good chance that if you haven't had good communication for a while, the laundry list is probably pretty long. But similar to you, if you've been doing this for a long time, like Shani and I don't, you know, there's still times where she apologizes because something's so small. And I'm like, no, it's still relevant. And we don't have big stuff because, you know, for 4 years, what's that, 200, we've had at least 200 of these conversations. Of course you don't have anything big after 200 of these firm conversations every Sunday.
Yeah, and you've also done it enough times that you become skilled at it. Because the
100%.
first time it'll probably go fucking terribly.
Clunky.
Yeah.
Clunky.
We've got this thing called a clearing conversation where, as the man, you take responsibility of all the things you've done wrong. I was going to break up with Rosie about 6 years ago. She wasn't giving me anything I wanted. And I'll touch on entitlement in a second. And I was so frustrated and angry at her. And a mentor, I called him to get support. And I just told her all the things she wasn't doing. She's not giving me sex, respect, appreciation. He said, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I'm like, what are you talking about? What the fuck are you doing, Tony? What are you not doing? So light bulb went off. I went back home. I spent 10 minutes, telling her that I get to change, get to be better. I want you to tell me all the things I get to change. My wife talks for 35 minutes, just ripping into me all this shit. In my head, I'm thinking, fuck you. But I'm just sitting there 35 minutes later, I'm seething with rage. And I looked her in the eyes and said, is there anything else? And she's super chill. She's like, nah, that's it. But it was such a vulnerable and powerful moment because like you say, it's getting to the truth, and the truth is so fucking painful. Having these conversations hurts, but so does your wife fucking another man or taking your children away from you and seeing them every third weekend.
Yeah.
So this idea of getting to the truth, it comes back to entitlement. Men will work hard for money. They don't expect it to fall into their lap, but they do feel entitled to sex, respect, appreciation, support from their partner just because they put a ring on it. Where does entitlement come from with your clients and in your experience? Why do we as men expect our partner to just give when we don't give in return? Where does that come from?
There's a couple of things that I want to touch on there. Starting like with respect first. So respect at the deepest need is evolutionary from a male point of view. Like we all need it and want it. And depending who you listen to, some people just believe that we should have respect. And I think it's a good place to start, like to respect people and everything else. And there's a number of ways in which men lose it, whether that's lack of integrity between their words and their actions, whether it's not showing up, whether it's not being present. Like you don't just get to keep it. It can move depending on kind of how you're showing up. So yes, a healthy relationship will start with that, but you'll be amazed if you fall into like nice guy, people pleasing, inability to say no, lack of integrity, all of these things, how they start to chip away at your respect. So knowing that that is important. I think also, you know, if it's a really clean and pure form of love, you don't give to get. That's where the entitlement often falls. Oh, I put a roof over your head. I've paid for the kids' schooling. Yeah, where are you doing that from? What place are you doing that from? If you're doing it to give to get, you're doing it from the wrong place. So this entitlement of being provider, awesome. Again, to the start of our conversation, it's 2024, mate. Just being a provider doesn't entitle you to sex, to respect, to admiration, etc. And I don't mind that. You know, I know there's a really unhealthy undercurrent of man-hating, and that's a different topic. There's a lot of lack of respect happening there. But I'm talking about the respect within a loving relationship that started out respectful and had a level of admiration and everything else. And it's dwindled away because of how you've shown up. So, you know, it's really hard for her to want to fuck you if she doesn't respect you. Really hard. And that often doesn't get spoken of. Like we're talking about sexless marriages and stuff like that. How about you just start with building back integrity and working out why she's not respecting you? And then the sex and everything else you might find that just starts to become a byproduct of you rebuilding yourself and rebuilding the trust and rebuilding the safety and rebuilding the respect within the relationship.
That takes a huge amount of balls.
Yeah.
Because it's looking in the mirror and saying, I'm not going to play the blame game anymore. She has a massive role to play. She's not blameless. But what can I take responsibility for here?
Yeah.
All misery comes from unmet expectations.
Yeah.
We have this expectation, I should have respect, I should have sex, I should. We should all over ourselves instead of looking in the fucking mirror. One way I like to look at relationships is like a bank, right? So what we tend to do is we keep withdrawing from this bank without making deposits. And then the bank is either an overdraft or it's empty. The bank person says you can't have any more money. We do that with our partners quite a lot. Yep. And being able to put deposits in that bank daily, whether it's through a nice text, whether it's through flowers, opening a door, doing something thoughtful without expecting anything in return.
That's the key.
Most men can't compute that.
Yeah.
Because they go, well, why because you're not doing it to get something. You're doing it because you fucking care. And that's your character, right? I want to dive into this topic of sex a little bit more. So sex is really important for guys. And a lot of men say to us, my wife, she's not a sexual person. She doesn't want to have sex. You know, it's always been like that. I call bullshit.
Yeah.
I call bullshit. Like there are times Rosie's exhausted. It happened last night. And she'll just let me, this sounds horrible, but she'll just let me do what I need to do. She's exhausted, but she knows. She'll smile and be like, go for it, baby. I'm just going to lay here, right? And I don't mind that. Like I don't mind that. She, but we've had these conversations about that's one of my needs and desires. So for the men out there who aren't having enough sex, their partner says, I'm not into it, it's not for me, whatever. What's your perspective on that?
So I think one thing that can churn a lot of blokes up is realizing that their partner that wasn't sexual with them is very sexual with the next person, or has a history of being very sexual. You know, it might be kind of exploring deeper things that they weren't exploring in the relationship with them. And similar to kind of the point that you made earlier, I've been in a number of situations where I've been like playing victim to the fact that my partner wasn't interested at that period of time, or that it wasn't happening as much as I wanted, as opposed to going, what can I do to influence that? Because she's a mirror for me. If she's not wanting to jump me, then where in myself do I need to step up, to show up, to commit more? As opposed to, you know, it's the easy option is to look around. That's the easy option. When you're not getting sex from your partner, oh, there's, you know, a little cutie at the gym, or here's Pornhub or whatever. That's the eject button. That's the easy out. As opposed to going, okay, this isn't happening. This is a byproduct of me. What do I need to do to step more into the relationship and show up and kind of make this a thing? I look at sex as like a key metric of the relationship. There's a number of others, but that's a key metric. If it's not happening, then that's an opportunity for you to reflect on you, the relationship, and where you need to step up, where you need to heal, where you need to communicate, where you need to connect, etc. So instead, you know, this is kind of almost one of the differences between an unconscious relationship and a conscious. A conscious relationship looks at a symptom and sees that as a signal to come back to the problem and get to the root cause, as opposed to the signal or the symptom being, you know, an opportunity to kind of, oh, they're annoying, they don't have a sex drive, they're the problem. Come back to self and like work out what the next evolution of growth, commitment, communication, etc. looks like for you.
That's so powerful. There are very few men that can listen to this right now, look in the mirror and say, I am stepping up and showing up as the man that she desires and wants to jump, wants to respect, wants to appreciate. But it takes, again, a lot of courage to do that.
I think the other thing, I mean, courage first and foremost. I think the other thing, you know, and this is where, you know, people like your work and the men's work has grown massively over the last 5 years, is I think there's still a lot of blokes that actually don't know the answer. You know, they go, well, fuck, maybe I'll just buy another handbag, or maybe I'll take her on another holiday. And then this resentment builds up because they're speaking a different love language that isn't really hitting the spot. And because they have attachment to it, a certain outcome from it, they just become this really bitter and resentful person because they've thrown money at the problem, because that's probably helped at some stage for, you know, some period of time in the past, but it's not working for them. And they're looking around going, fuck, like, must be more money. You know, similar to that kind of carrot that a lot of blokes are chasing, where it's a nice car, nice house, nice bank account. It lasted 24 hours, it lasted a month, and now it wears off and there's a level of emptiness or there's something missing. I must need a better car. I must need a bigger house. I must need a, you know, bigger bank balance. And they chase this carrot, this elusive carrot that never quite hits the spot.
And when does it end?
Well, the way that I look at it is one of three places. They either continue on that path and they keep chasing the bigger, shinier, faster, whatever it might be. They chase these things, realize that it's not the answer, and then start looking around for another answer. Or like many of us, they fall into this valley and everything kind of burns down, whether it's life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a health. And through that pain, they have to reassess and go, fuck, there must be another way to do this.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately where I had to get to. I kind of, to be honest, I was starting to reassess before the capitulation. I was starting to go, fuck, this doesn't feel great for me. So I was starting to reassess, but I needed to bottom out and burn everything to the ground to rebuild everything from the ground up.
Yeah. You went through that pattern that so many guys go through. They just death loop. And insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. So getting that handbag or doing the shit that's not working while resentment builds. When was the last time you asked? When was the last time you asked your partner, what do you want from me? What are you not getting? Where am I not deserving respect. Asking these questions gives you the answer, but it takes asking the question, right? So I want to jump tack here a little bit. You've talked a little bit about psychedelics. I took mushrooms probably 5 years ago. I had severe anxiety, couldn't leave my house, medication, pills, psychologist, therapist. I just could not get rid of it. I did one 3-gram dose of mushrooms in a dark room, blindfold, and I disappeared, did not exist anymore. There was no Tony, there just was.
Yeah.
Came back, moved my arm. I'm like, I have an arm. That's not my arm. That is just a sack of flesh. So a lot of people listening right now will be cracking up and going, what the fuck? But it changed my life fundamentally. And Rosie and I have actually done microdoses, and it's helped us so much. This isn't medical advice, but you've done 30 of these experiences. How has this impacted your relationship with business and your Shani, your partner?
Yeah.
Like, how has this impacted you as a man? What was the before and after? And what would you say to someone who's questioning these sorts of things?
So firstly, I'm actually qualified in psychedelic practitioner because
that was the thing.
Yeah.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah, because of the impact that it had for me. So, there's a number, if you look at the research and the science, there's a number of different ways that you can, cut up psychedelics, mushrooms, MDMA therapy, bufo, like there's so many different avenues. So for me, my partner and I, Shani, have done 2 MDMA therapy sessions together. And then I've done 3 or 4 on my own. And what we found was we had an issue early last year, and we spoke about it. We spoke about it till it felt like we'd spoken till death, but it just felt like lodged is the best way to describe it. And hopefully people can't understand what I mean by that, but it just felt like I couldn't move forward from it. So we did MDMA therapy with one of our therapists. And I remember kind of talking it out. And because MDMA therapy lowers all your kind of barriers and also your emotional state and really brings on, the kind of heart state, I felt it move from my body. And, we would have spoken about it probably once a week for 6 to 9 months before that, completely gone after it, and it hasn't been a problem. So I look at it and I go, I've got access to an unbelievable team of therapists, healers, coaches, counselors, whatever it might be. But when you've spoken about something and it can't quite get to the bottom, or you've journaled or whatever, that's generally when I'll call in the big dogs in terms of the psychedelics. The other thing from a business point of view is psychedelics is unbelievable for expanding your consciousness. So if you're lacking clarity on yourself, you're lacking clarity on your business, you're lacking clarity on your relationship, psychedelics will take you to a place that you ultimately most likely won't be able to get to on your own. And it's no surprise that Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, half of Silicon Valley use psychedelics regularly to expand their consciousness and then come up with new ideas or solutions for the problems that they got within their business and also themselves. And I come back to the fact that most of your business problems are generally personal problems wrapped up as business problems. So whether it's, a lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, all of these things are our personal problems are, whether you like it or not, showing up in your business. So the more work that you can do on you, the benefits, as we've spoken about throughout the course of the last hour, run across the board. So, from psychedelic point of view, to really simplify it, you're probably looking at different ways to heal yourself, of which you won't get through therapy, and also expand the mind and expand the consciousness to find answers, to seek solutions that therapy won't do. And they'll often talk about, one psychedelic journey potentially being up to 10 years worth of therapy. And having experienced a lot of therapy and therapy and coaching still plays the majority of my role and also my life. But when I can't get to the bottom of something or I can't find an answer, that's when I'll call in psychedelics.
Yeah, I would make an assumption here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that this is a tool that we can utilize when we've done the foundations well. So we get a coach, an expert, someone like you or I who knows how to navigate these issues. Read the ebook, go to a therapist, get into a good routine, start asking difficult questions, get your body, gut, sleep, mind healthy. And if all those things are coming together and at that point you cannot resolve it, then it's something to explore
100%.
With the caveat, and I'd love for you to speak into this, being mindful that it's not for everyone, right? If you've got certain health conditions or bipolar, it can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
But am I on the mark there? Like, get the foundations right, and then it is a tool to assist the foundations, as opposed to everything's fucked, let's just do some MDMA, right?
Definitely don't do that. And when I talk about MDMA therapy, I always get a bunch of lads who take the piss going, I've taken heaps of that. It's different
It's different. Yeah, it's not like getting on the bags with your mates. It's like
it's a very different story.
Setting. Yeah.
Good on them for having a crack and a laugh. But there's also a very big difference between, you know, the junk that you might be taking out at clubs and pharmaceutical grade with a therapist in the right environment.
Yeah.
But to your point, you always want to go in with one, a clear intention as best as possible. But two, you know, I had a really challenging ayahuasca journey 5 weeks ago. And had I not done the amount of work that I have done, it potentially would have sent me in a spiral that was unhealthy. It was like the ultimate shadow work in a journey of which, had I not done shadow work, had I not understood what was actually playing out, it would have been really challenging. So the more work that you have done, the better you'll be supported in the journey. It won't necessarily always make the journey easier, but the better you'll be able to navigate yourself through a situation like that. Because had someone experienced what I experienced in a journey, that Aya journey 5 weeks ago, where my partner and my daughter were in it, it was gnarly. Had they not done the work and had they not understood what was happening with psychedelics, it could have spiraled them as well. So yeah, 100% do get the foundations right. And generally I'll say, wait till you feel called to it. You know, whether it's MDMA therapy, whether it's, you know, magic mushroom, psilocybin, whether it's Aya, you know, or across the board, there's a whole bunch of others. Generally you want to feel called to it before you explore it, as opposed, like, do not in any way be pressured into that. That's the worst energy to go into it. So if you explore the world of that, and the world of psychedelics these days is really starting to open up slowly but surely, and that's probably a bigger topic.
RFK saying he's going to remove the restrictions in America with Trump in there, which is insane. Let's go to America.
Well, the challenge that you've got, and this could be a slippery slope, but anyway, is psychedelics expand your consciousness. All right. So if you have a whole society of people that have expanded their consciousness, they're probably going to be asking more questions. And if they're asking more questions, there's a whole bunch of systems that society is built around that would be questioned. So I can understand from a dictatorship point of view and a government point of view why you want to keep people asleep. And when you take psychedelics, you ain't staying asleep.
No.
So I obviously, as a big advocate of it and as a psychedelic practitioner, will be pushing for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get legalized in Australia, because the moment that the moment people understand the power and the healing properties of psychedelics, and you get a whole bunch of people, you know, taking this into a mainstream place, you're going to wake a lot of people up. Mm-hmm. And that has, I think, positive ramifications. But as a society and as a government who's trying to kind of control us, it doesn't become as easy to control us when we are awake.
So true. I want to touch on 4 more points, and I might lose track of them. So much has come up for me here. So you mentioned shadow work. I want to talk about the role of the father for masculine men who create great relationships, the feeling of not being good enough. And I've lost the 4th one already. But let's start with the shadow work, and it will come back to me because it was an important point. So let's start with shadow work. What do you mean by that in the sense of relationships, self, and wealth? Yeah,
gotcha. So when we're born whole. And then as we develop this identity, this persona, and essentially this ego. All right. People's understanding of ego is inflated sense of self. Ego is a little bit kind of more nuanced than that. But we develop this identity. Society tells us what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we should behave, how we should show up. And off that, partners, our parents, society, schooling, we develop this view and this image and identity that we want to show the world. We're happy, we're always positive, we smile, we're well-mannered, etc. As we start to develop this identity, we often find that there's these parts that we push in the other direction that we suppress and we push into the shadow. All right? So if society tells us that we should be a happy, nice guy, the shadow might become an angry, not so nice guy. All right? So this is real kind of surface level, but just to kind of land the plane a little bit. So the challenge that you have with a shadow is because you've pushed it in the shadow, these certain parts of yourself, they then get pushed into the unconscious. And if you're not aware of what's in the unconscious, you run the risk of it showing up in a dysfunctional, disordered, or disorientated way. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a female who was a pretty wild cat, dancer as a kid, then into cheerleading and became like a table dancer at, clubs in Ibiza. And then she met a guy who was like straighty 180. And this wild part of her then had to become suppressed, or she thought it had to become suppressed to meet this guy where he was at. All right. Then she had a kid, and apparently as a mum, you're meant to show up a certain way. You can't allow this wild part to kind of get out. So she's pushing it further and further into the shadow. Now, the problem with that, if you imagine a beach ball, you push a beach ball down, down, down underwater, eventually, it blows up. So she's pushing this part of herself down, 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 and every few months, she goes on a wild bender and a whole bunch of things happen that suppressed part has come out. All right, so if you kind of bring this across to blokes, the suppressed part might be your anger that you've pushed down, down, down. Then you have alcohol, and that's often when it comes up and it explodes out. So is anger good or bad? Well, society will probably tell you it's bad. And for that reason, most blokes push anger into the shadow. But it's bad when you don't know where it is, e.g. in the shadow, and it's bad if you don't know how to use it. Now, if someone breaks into your house and you're sleeping with your wife and your daughter, my guess, you probably want to access anger. For blokes, anger can be a really healthy source of motivation when they've had enough of their own bullshit. Like anger is often like, I'm fucking sick of this, I'm making change. I don't know about you, I love anger as a really good source of energy for working out. If I'm at the gym, listening to Jack Johnson Banana Pancakes probably isn't going to help me get like that real fire that I need. So I'll listen to something that like evokes that kind of energy to get the most out of my workout. So you want to know your shadow, and it's hard to look at. It's really hard to look at. I'll tell a story. If you don't understand shadow, this is going to be triggering, but I'll tell a story anyway. You all right with that?
Yeah, 100%.
So 5 weeks ago, I did the ayahuasca ceremony. And in it, I went in with the intention for Aya to show me what I need to see or what I need to heal prior to becoming a father. And the first part was that I needed to feel my upbringing, which was pretty unhealthy. I'd spoken about it a lot, but I hadn't really felt it. And in order to heal something, you need to feel it. So in front of me, and this is hard for people to understand if they've never done a journey, I essentially watched my childhood and all the abuse and everything that happened and needed to stay in it to feel it. So once I felt it, I've healed it, and therefore a much better version of myself as I go into fatherhood. The second half of the Aya ceremony was essentially the kind of Aya asked me, what's your greatest fear around fatherhood? And for me, it was replicating any behaviors that I saw as part of my upbringing. And this is why you need to have done work before you go into journeys. So I was like, okay, Well, if that's your greatest fear, how about we play it out now? So in the journey, and again, if you don't understand shadow work, this might be triggering. In the journey, I witnessed me abusing my partner and my daughter. That's my shadow. All right? So in order to sit with that, I witnessed the darkest fear of mine, which is essentially my shadow. And now all of a sudden I feel at peace with that. So the more that you can step into and understand your shadow, the less unconscious you are. Now you want to remember that the unconscious is essentially driving most of your behaviors. So we want to minimize how much is sitting in the unconscious. Now that's a super gnarly example of shadow work, but that's essentially what shadow is.
That's powerful because that's what we get to do with the relationship stuff from earlier. Like if I don't have this conversation with my wife, she will leave. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
And accessing that fear and that deep, dark part of yourself. This ties perfectly into my next two questions. Fatherhood, childhood, and this feeling of not being enough. So we have a guy, talk about him often, $80 million a year business, and it's never enough. And he's aware of this, but he needs more. It's not enough. You and I both know from the work that I'm not enough. It's not the business. It's not the money. I know for me, my parents separated when I was 4 years old. The earliest memories I have of my father and brother is my father hitting my brother so hard that I still to this day remember his head hitting the wall, screaming, crying. He'd be drunk every third weekend when he'd pick us up, stumbling. And there was a period where I hated my father because I didn't know any better. I love him now. He did his best. He might hear this and get upset at me like he has done in the past, but I've forgiven him. He didn't do anything wrong. He just wasn't aware. A lot of men listening to this know that they've got shadows inside of themselves they get to work on. They know their marriage isn't ideal. They know their kids are seeing a broken marriage. They know that their gut's so big they can't see their fucking dick anymore. Like, I don't say it to joke. Like, there are some broken things in there, right? We always laugh about it when I say it, clients do. But the point I'm trying to make here is most of my shit, and I'm assuming most of your shit, and most of men's shit comes from our childhood.
100%.
So tying that all together, shadow work, awareness, being a father, most of your clients, I'm assuming most of my clients are fathers. How do we tie that all together and understand the importance of every single day from now until they're 18, 20 and use that as fuel to shift something now? Talk to me about your childhood. You talked about abuse. Talk to me about how that can potentially help these men listening.
Well, I think one of the hardest things to do is always to qualify or quantify exactly the role that your family had on you. Like for me to go, my mum's been an alcoholic my whole life. My dad and her split when I was 2. He lives in the UK. And for my stepdad to be super abusive. Like I don't know, I can't qualify and quantify exactly how that shows up in my life, other than I know that that is not the ideal upbringing. So if we tie in the fact that, 95% of who you become is formed in the first kind of 7 to 10 years, you, based on that, can see that you are a byproduct of your parents, but also your kids are going to be a byproduct of you. So the imprint period, 0 to 7, 95% of who they're going to become later in life is formed in those first formative years, those first 7. So I look at that and go, I can't guarantee that I won't fuck my kids up. Like shit's going to go wrong, but fuck, I can do a lot of work to minimize it. And again, to my point earlier, I feel a responsibility and an obligation to make sure that's the case. Like when I look at the 250 therapy sessions I've done, I look at the 30 odd psychedelic journeys I've done, my girl is going to have a lot better life than I did. And that's all I can do. Like she hopefully won't know about most of the trauma that I experienced because I've done so much work to clear and clean the path so that she has a better existence. Like I wouldn't want anyone to, I'm grateful that everything that happened has got me here sitting with you right now having this conversation. And for that reason, I'm grateful. But I wouldn't want anyone to experience that. To the point, like was talking about this on a podcast last week, and I was kind of talking about a story where there was a period where I was sleeping on a mattress on the ground in my brother's spare room, when I was kind of rebuilding. Mate, I would sleep on a mattress every fucking day of the week if it meant that I was living in a safe home. Whereas for a lot of other people, to your clients and mine who make a lot of money, cool, they got a nice big house. But if those kids don't feel love and safety under that roof, what for? I had nice houses, I went to prestigious schools, but home was the least safe place for me to be. And if the world's hard and the world's unsafe at times, the least that any parent can do is provide a safety for their kids.
That's our responsibility. That's the whole point of all this shit.
Yeah.
We had a guest on here a few months ago, Nerida Bint, and she said something so fucking profoundly powerful. She said the currency that your kids are paid in is called time. And it's not just the quantity of time, it's 100%. The quality of time.
Yeah.
Our whole role as men, as humans, is to expand. Our job is to create. It's to create expansion. And part of that expansion is passing on the values and the morals and the integrity and the health and the working through our own trauma to our children so that their life and path is easier. Now, not necessarily easier as in it's going to be a walk in the park, but removing these unnecessary traumas and barriers. So as a man, if you are looking in the mirror and seeing an overweight body, if you are seeing a dysfunctional relationship, feeling a disconnection in your marriage, it is your moral duty and obligation to fix that shit. And what's crazy is you can't control your wife, your kids, your business, anything outside of you, but you can influence those things. And you influence those things by working on the man within. That's the number one investment. You alluded to a $70,000 vehicle. Most men spend more on their phones and cars than themselves. They upgrade to the newest model. All of what you've shared today comes down to upgrading yourself. Invest in yourself, work on yourself, understand yourself, question yourself. And while you're doing that, get your wife, get a coach, get your friend group. If you don't have one, go to a community and get that support. Work on yourself, get people to support you with it. And guess what happens? It won't get fixed overnight, but you'll move forward. So for a man listening to this right now, who is a high performer, making good money, but they know their relationships, their health, the rest of their life is falling apart or not where it needs to be. Maybe it's complacency. Those 6 Ps aren't where they need to be. What would you say to that man today to get him off his ass, to get him to take action and to do something about it?
Well, I think, to the point that we made earlier, a life without any of those 6 Ps, there's going to be something that's kind of falling down. But from if we're talking relationships, start with that weekly check-in. And, if you're navigating this together as a partnership, because that's what you are, you want to remember that you're a partnership, it's probably not the right time to bring out the laundry list of everything that's wrong with the relationship, but just bring one thing to light and just chip away at it. And yes, we've spoken about courage and respect a lot in this chat. It's probably going to be painful. But are you going to kick the can down the road and have it painful in 3 months' time or 6 months' time or 12 months' time or 2 years' time? Or just deal with it now? Because I tell you what, when she walks out and the divorce settlement and you barely see your kids, that's going to be a lot more painful than addressing it right now. And to your point, you're a motivated person, I'm a motivated person, and we still need the right people around us. Doesn't matter how motivated or how unmotivated you are. I still need a good environment around me of epic blokes that hold me accountable, epic blokes that support me. Obviously, my partner is everything and so is my daughter to be. But you need to put yourself in the right environment. And yes, if you want to have mates who, you go to and watch the footy and do that's your choice. And every single bloke needs someone else, whether it's a mate, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a group, that holds them accountable to a high standard. Everyone.
100%. Brother, it's been fucking epic. I'm so excited to see you raise your daughter and your future children.
So
I'm sure I'll be coming down to Byron to hang. And if you're ever around for an ice bath, come over. We'll do this chat again in the next few months. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for having me on.
Easy.
If you're getting value from this podcast episode and you want to learn how you can have a better relationship, a better marriage, you can be a better father, husband, the man you know your family deserves, then it's very fucking hard to do that just by listening and getting fed information. Sure, this is valuable, but what's much more valuable is having a custom roadmap and a custom plan. And that's exactly what we do here at The Empowered Man. So if you want to learn how to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, and find work-life balance, then that's exactly what we want to help you with. We'll help you make more money, working less hours, have that life you deserve by becoming unfuckwithable. Just tap the link down below in the description and go and book a coaching session with my Empowered Man team. On that session, we'll build your custom Empowered Man roadmap to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, find work-life balance, and have the life you deserve. Click the link down below right now.